My name is Claire Harper, and if you're reading this, you probably think I'm the villain of my own story. Maybe I am. But let me tell you how it all began, because nothing about this was ever black and white. It started in an office that smelled like stale coffee and ambition. Two things I knew well by then. That office belonged to Crestwood Innovations, a company that prided itself on being cutting edge, but really just thrived on overworked employees and underpaid interns. I wasn't always bitter, not at first anyway. When I joined Crestwood 5 years ago, fresh out of college with stars in my eyes, I believed in their mission. They promised innovation, growth, and opportunity for everyone who walked through those glass doors. And for a while, they delivered, for some people at least. For me, it was long hours, skipped meals, and weekends spent buried in spreadsheets instead of seeing sunlight. But I didn't mind. I thought hard work would pay off eventually. I thought loyalty mattered. Then came Marcus Caldwell, our CEO. He wasn't there when I started. He swooped in 3 years ago after the board decided Crestwood needed new blood. New blood turned out to be code for ruthless efficiency. The moment Marcus took charge, layoffs became routine, raises disappeared, and every decision seemed calculated to maximize profit without regard for the humans behind the numbers. Still, I stayed, because even though Marcus made life hell, I told myself I could handle it. After all, I had bills to pay and dreams to chase. But here's the thing about surviving in places like Crestwood. It changes you. You learn to play the game, even if you hate it. You smile when you want to scream, nod when you want to argue, and keep your head down when you know speaking up will only get you fired. So, yeah, maybe I became someone I barely recognized, a version of myself polished smooth by compromise and fear. Until the day Marcus called me into his office and said something that changed everything. It was a Tuesday morning, one of those gray days where the clouds hang low enough to smother any hope of sunshine. I remember sitting at my desk, staring blankly at my computer screen as emails piled up faster than I could answer them. My phone buzzed, a message from HR asking me to come upstairs immediately. Immediately? That word sent a chill down my spine. No one gets summoned to the executive floor unless something big is happening, and usually, big meant bad news. When I stepped into Marcus's office, the air felt heavier than usual, like the room itself knew what was coming. Marcus sat behind his massive oak desk, looking every bit the part of the corporate titan. Tailored suit, perfectly gelled hair, and a smile so fake it might as well have been photoshopped onto his face. Across from him sat Emily, the head of HR, clutching a manila folder like it contained state secrets. Neither of them offered me a seat, so I stood awkwardly near the door, waiting for whatever axe was about to fall. "Claire," Marcus began, leaning back in his chair with an exaggerated sigh. "You've been with us for, 5 years now." His tone was casual, almost friendly, but I knew better. This wasn't small talk, it was preamble. 5 good years, he continued before I could respond. "And during that time, you've contributed significantly to this company's success." Here we go, I thought, bracing myself. The classic setup before the punchline. But he paused dramatically, letting the silence stretch until it felt unbearable. "As much as we appreciate your efforts, sometimes tough decisions have to be made for the greater good of the organization." Emily shifted uncomfortably beside him, avoiding eye contact. She hated these meetings almost as much as the people being fired did. Meanwhile, Marcus pressed on, delivering the canned speech about restructuring and budget cuts, none of which fooled me for a second. Everyone knew layoffs were less about saving money and more about consolidating power. Still, I nodded along, pretending to listen, because what else was I supposed to do? Finally, he got to the point. "So, effective immediately, we'll need you to clear out your desk and return your access badge and laptop. We'll process your final paycheck within 2 weeks, and HR will provide information on severance options." Severance options. Right. As if anything they offered would soften the blow of losing my livelihood or my dignity. I wanted to say something clever, something biting, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I just stood there, numb, trying to process what was happening. That's when Marcus added the kicker, the line that would haunt me for weeks to come. "Oh, and Claire," he said, standing up and extending his hand like we were old friends parting ways. "Take everything that's yours. Don't leave anything behind." At first, I didn't understand. Was he talking about my personal belongings? My files? Or was this just another empty gesture meant to make him feel less guilty about firing me? I shook his hand automatically, still too stunned to react, and mumbled something vague about gathering my things. Then I left, walking back to my cubicle on autopilot, feeling like a ghost haunting the halls of a place I no longer belonged. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Colleagues avoided meeting my gaze, pretending not to notice the box I carried as I packed up 5 years of my life. Some whispered condolences, others offered weak smiles, but most acted like I'd already disappeared. By the time I reached the parking lot, my car felt foreign, like it belonged to someone else. Someone who hadn't just been unceremoniously dumped by the company she'd given everything to. As I drove home, Marcus's words echoed in my mind. Take everything that's yours. At first, it sounded harmless, even reasonable. But the more I thought about it, the angrier I got. Everything that's mine. Fine. If that's how he wanted to play it, I'd take everything and then some. By the time I pulled into my driveway, a plan was forming. Not a fully fleshed out strategy, but a seed of an idea that grew darker with each passing hour. Crestwood had taken everything from me, my time, my energy, my sense of self-worth. Now it was my turn to take back what was rightfully mine. Over the next few days, I couldn't shake the anger simmering inside me. It wasn't just about losing my job, it was about how disposable I felt, how little my years of dedication seemed to matter. Every email notification, every LinkedIn update reminding me of colleagues moving forward while I stagnated, fueled the fire burning in my chest. I replayed Marcus's words over and over again, twisting them until they became a mantra. Take everything that's yours. But what exactly was mine? My ideas? My contributions? The countless late nights spent perfecting projects that earned Crestwood millions? None of that belonged to me anymore. Not legally, anyway. The company owned the patents, the designs, the strategies. All I had left were scraps. A few personal files on my work laptop, which I'd already returned, a handful of contacts, and a deep, seething resentment. Then it hit me. What if I didn't limit myself to physical possessions or intellectual property? What if I interpreted Marcus's directive literally and expansively? Crestwood had built its empire on data, algorithms, and client relationships. What if I found a way to dismantle the very foundation they stood on? The thought terrified me and thrilled me. For the first time since getting fired, I felt alive. I started small, testing the waters. First, I created a throwaway email account and began reaching out to former coworkers, casually asking how things were going at Crestwood. Most responses were polite but guarded, but a few hinted at growing dissatisfaction. Turns out, I wasn't the only one who'd grown disillusioned under Marcus's leadership. Encouraged, I dug deeper, piecing together fragments of gossip and insider knowledge. Slowly, a picture emerged of a company teetering on the edge of chaos. Meanwhile, I immersed myself in research. Late at night, after everyone else in my apartment building was asleep, I scoured forums and blogs for information on corporate espionage, whistleblower tactics, and digital security vulnerabilities. I wasn't tech-savvy by nature, but desperation can make anyone resourceful. I learned how to use anonymizing tools, encrypt messages, and cover my tracks online. Each new skill felt like arming myself for battle. One name kept popping up in my investigations. Alex Hart, a senior developer at Crestwood. Alex had been quietly pushing back against Marcus's policies for months, advocating for better working conditions and fairer compensation. Rumor had it that Alex had even tried to organize a union, though the effort had fizzled out quickly under pressure from management. Intrigued, I decided to reach out. Crafting the initial message took hours. I didn't want to scare Alex off, but I also needed to convey urgency. Finally, I settled on a simple introduction. Hey Alex, this is Claire Harper. Remember me? I think we might have something in common. To my surprise, Alex replied almost immediately, suggesting we meet in person. We agreed on a neutral location, a quiet cafe downtown, and arranged to talk the following week. The day of our meeting, I dressed carefully, choosing clothes that struck a balance between professional and approachable. As I waited at a corner table, sipping lukewarm coffee, I rehearsed what I planned to say. I didn't want to come across as unhinged or reckless. I needed Alex to see me as an ally, not a loose cannon. When Alex finally arrived, sliding into the seat across from me, I felt a surge of nervous excitement. This was it, the moment when my plan would either gain traction or crumble entirely. Alex looked younger than I expected, with sharp features and an intensity that reminded me of myself before Crestwood ground me down. After exchanging pleasantries, I dove straight into the reason for our meeting. "I assume you've heard about my departure," I began, gauging their reaction. Alex nodded, expression unreadable. "Let's just say I'm not leaving quietly." For the next hour, I laid out my thoughts, sharing snippets of what I'd uncovered and outlining potential ways to hold Crestwood accountable. At first, Alex listened skeptically, interjecting occasionally to ask clarifying questions. But as I spoke, I saw a flicker of interest ignite in their eyes. By the end of our conversation, Alex was nodding enthusiastically, agreeing that something needed to change. "Okay," Alex said finally, leaning forward with a determined glint in their eye. "Let's do this, but we need to be smart about it. One wrong move, and we're both screwed." With Alex on board, the pieces began falling into place. Together, we mapped out a strategy, dividing tasks based on our respective strengths. While Alex focused on accessing sensitive internal systems, I worked on building a network of disgruntled employees willing to share their stories. It wasn't easy. Convincing people to trust us required patience and persistence, but slowly our coalition grew. Each step brought us closer to the heart of Crestwood, exposing cracks in its polished facade. And yet, despite the progress, doubts lingered in the back of my mind. Was I crossing a line? Could I live with the consequences of what we were planning? These questions haunted me, but I pushed them aside, telling myself that justice demanded sacrifice. Besides, Marcus had given me permission, hadn't he? Take everything that's yours. Little did I know the real challenge lay ahead, and it would test me in ways I couldn't imagine. As the weeks turned into months, our operation became more intricate and daring. Alex and I communicated exclusively through encrypted channels, sharing updates late at night when the rest of the world seemed to sleep. The weight of what we were doing pressed heavily on both of us, but neither of us backed down. Every email leak, every whispered conversation with a disgruntled employee, every piece of data Alex extracted, it all felt like another brick pulled from Crestwood's foundation. But as much as I tried to focus on the mission, there were moments when doubt crept in. Late one evening, after spending hours combing through confidential client agreements Alex had smuggled out, I found myself staring blankly at my computer screen. My reflection stared back at me, hollow-eyed and pale, and for a moment I didn't recognize the person looking back. Was this really who I'd become? Someone willing to destroy lives, reputations, and livelihoods just to settle a score? I shook off the thought. This wasn't about revenge anymore, not entirely. It was about exposing the truth, about holding Crestwood accountable for years of exploitation. If Marcus Caldwell could treat people like disposable assets, then why shouldn't he face the consequences? Still, the nagging voice in my head wouldn't quiet down. What if we went too far? What if the fallout hurt innocent people who hadn't chosen this fight? The turning point came sooner than I expected. One night, Alex sent me an urgent message. They'd uncovered something big, something that could bring Crestwood to its knees. I met them at the same cafe where we'd first plotted our strategy, though this time the air between us was electric with tension. "You're not going to believe this," Alex said, sliding a flash drive across the table toward me. "It's everything. Financial records, internal memos, emails, proof that Marcus has been embezzling funds for years, not just from shareholders, but from employees' retirement accounts." My stomach dropped. Embezzlement was worse than anything I'd imagined. This wasn't just corporate greed, it was outright theft. And yet, as I stared at the tiny flash drive, I couldn't help but feel a pang of fear. Releasing this information wouldn't just ruin Marcus. It would send shockwaves through the entire company. People would lose their jobs. Families would suffer. Could I live with that? "What do you want to do?" Alex asked, their voice low but steady. "We can go public with this. Leak it to the press. Send it to regulators. Or," they hesitated, glancing around the cafe before continuing, "we can use it as leverage. Force Marcus to step down, maybe even push for reforms within the company." For a long moment, I didn't answer. Both options had their appeal and their risks. Going public would ensure justice, but at what cost? Using the evidence as leverage might spare some collateral damage, but it also meant negotiating with the very man who had wronged us. Either way, there was no going back once we made our move. I need time to think, I finally said, pocketing the flash drive. Let's meet again tomorrow. That night, I barely slept. I replayed every possible scenario in my mind, weighing the pros and cons until my head throbbed. By morning, I still didn't have a clear answer. But when Alex and I reconvened, I realized something important. This decision wasn't mine alone. It belonged to everyone who had trusted us, everyone whose voices we were trying to amplify. Let's call a meeting, I told Alex. Everyone involved. We'll present the evidence and let them decide what to do with it. Alex nodded, though I could see the apprehension in their eyes. And if they vote to go public, then that's what we'll do, I said firmly. Whatever happens next, we're in this together. The meeting took place in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town, a fittingly dramatic setting for such a pivotal moment. About 20 people showed up, ranging from former co-workers to current employees risking their jobs to be there. As Alex and I laid out the evidence, the room fell silent. When we finished, no one spoke for several minutes. Finally, someone raised their hand. If we release this, Crestwood will collapse, they said. A lot of good people are going to get hurt. Another voice chimed in. But if we don't, nothing changes. Marcus wins, and we stay stuck in the same nightmare. The debate raged on for hours, each side presenting compelling arguments. In the end, the group reached a consensus. We would release the evidence, but strategically. Instead of dumping everything at once, we'd work with investigative journalists to break the story in stages, giving employees time to prepare and minimizing the immediate impact. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was the best we could hope for. Over the following weeks, the leaks began. Each revelation sent shockwaves through the business community, painting Crestwood as a den of corruption and deceit. Marcus denied everything at first, lashing out at critics and accusing whistleblowers of sabotage. But the evidence was undeniable, and soon enough, the walls closed in around him. In the aftermath, Crestworld imploded. Investors pulled out, clients fled, and the stock price plummeted. Marcus was arrested, charged with multiple counts of fraud and embezzlement. Some employees lost their jobs, while others banded together to rebuild the company under new leadership. It wasn't easy, and it certainly wasn't pretty, but it was justice. As for me, I walked away from it all with mixed feelings. On one hand, I felt a sense of vindication, knowing that Marcus had finally paid for his crimes. On the other hand, I couldn't ignore the toll it had taken, not just on me, but on everyone involved. Revenge, I realized, is a double-edged sword. It cuts both ways. Today, I'm starting over. I've taken a job at a small nonprofit, focused on workplace rights, using my experience to advocate for fairer policies and stronger protections for workers. It's not glamorous, and it doesn't pay nearly as well as Crestwood did, but it feels right. For the first time in years, I feel like I'm contributing to something meaningful. Looking back, I don't regret what I did, but I also know I'll never forget the lessons I learned along the way. Power corrupts, but so does anger. Justice matters, but so does compassion. And sometimes the hardest thing isn't fighting for what's yours. It's deciding how far you're willing to go to get it. Marcus Caldwell may have told me to take everything that was mine, but in the end, I discovered something far more valuable: the courage to build a better future, not just for myself, but for everyone who deserves a second chance. In the end, Crestwood collapsed under the weight of its own corruption, and Marcus faced justice for his crimes. Though the fallout wasn't perfect, it ignited change. Employees banded together to rebuild, and reforms began to take root. For me, walking away wasn't easy, but I found purpose in advocating for workplace rights at a nonprofit. Revenge taught me hard lessons about power, anger, and justice, but it also showed me the importance of compassion. Marcus told me to take everything that was mine, but what I truly reclaimed was my voice and a chance to help others find theirs.